something about our process, but I want to welcome Christian Grant, who is also here virtually, who is a student at Lewis and Clark Law School, that we wanted to invite, or perhaps Janice already did invite, to join us as an external member on the audit committee. And former teacher, Christian, you want to tell us a little bit about your interest in joining this pursuit, and we're really glad you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, so like you mentioned, I'm a former educator, still a licensed teacher, still really a big part of my identity. So I do keep my license active. I was also involved with the North Clackamas Education Association. I was their elected treasurer, and currently work for the Oregon School Boards Association as a law clerk. And really what I'm interested in doing is supporting Portland Public Schools. Clearly I'm a big advocate for education, and still want to support in a way that, is suited to my interests and current skill set.
That's great. We appreciate it very much. And we still have another opening for an external community member, and we're still hoping to get more interest in that. So, call out to everyone here in this room and virtually. If you know people that you think would be well qualified and interested in serving on the audit committee, please let us know. We are particularly looking for someone who has some experience with government auditing. We had someone who had inquired several months ago who was unable to join us now because circumstances have changed and job commitments. So really hoping that we can find someone who has some familiarity with those processes. But Christian, Janice probably told you, we typically meet on a quarterly basis. We approve an annual slate of audit topics. We've just shifted that to coincide with our school year. So we'll start that process again in late summer. We have a report today, a final report on an audit that was recently wrapped up. Are you able to join us for the meeting, for the rest of the meeting, or?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you'll hear wrapping up one audit and the very first phase of an audit we have yet to undertake on our hardship transfer process. So you'll just get a sense of the flow of that work. That's kind of a good example there with those two. Is there anything else you want to add, Janice?
Sorry, Christian. I did tell you that you weren't going to have to say anything, so put you on the spot.
I did not grill you too hard.
I'm sorry about that. This is pretty typical here. People usually have to talk on their first day of employment, so I guess maybe you're no different if you're going to show up to PPS.
Some people even have to testify before the board at the dais on their first day of employment.
On the first day. So, welcome.
I guess I should have introduced myself. So I'm Director Constam. I chair this committee. We've got Director Scott there, who serves on this committee. Director Hollins, who's also on this committee, is unable to join us today. Director Brim Edwards has just joined us, who serves on the board. And then we have Parker Myris and Xander Levine. Are you both actually designated on the audit committee? Yeah, that's what I thought. So two of our student representatives, part of our very active district student council. And then Kate Wilkinson from our office of our general counsel, and Roseanne Powell, our board secretary.
Awesome.
Worth noting that Kate used to be one of the community members on the audit committee.
True. Hi, Christian.
Hey.
So, did you circulate his resume? And
I think I did initially as a prospective candidate.
Okay. I printed it for those of you here, so it's in your packet.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in there in private view? Okay.
Okay, so we'll just move on to a status update of where we are midstream here.
These are in board books for you guys, but I just want to share too, just in case it's easier to look at your screen here. So, just our regular audit status update right now, the ACH audit, we will go over that today in our agenda. The hardship petition transfer, we're gonna have an opportunity later today to go over the scope of that. The next audit would be the student body activities funds audit. We'll begin that after hardship transfer, which was gonna take a couple of months. And then just recently, the ESL audit was approved by the full board at a recent board meeting, and so we've added it to our audit plan. So that's kind of a high level status on each of the audits that we have on our agenda. So if it's okay with you, we'll just go into the next item.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So today I wanted to go over the wrap up of the ACH audit. Most of you will remember what the original ACH audit was about, but I'm just going to go over very little high level because it's not very complicated. But my computer is. Hold on. Okay, so back in August of 2019, the district experienced a fraudulent transaction attempt through the ACH payment process. And once the incident was identified, the district immediately took actions to address the fraudulent attempt and review the district's payment processes and procedure to ensure future fraudulent attempts are prevented. So subsequently, the district's deputy superintendent requested that the Office of Internal Performance Audit do an audit of the ACH payment program to see if they are following best practices and their internal controls are adequate to prevent such a incident from happening. In January of 2021, we issued the initial ACH payment method audit report, which is included in this audit report in the appendix. At that time, the school district had not yet started its ACH payment program. As a result, in that initial audit, we were able to look at the internal controls. We just weren't able to test those processes because they weren't setting up new vendors at that time. Subsequently, they have started that process back. So we did test it and the district's doing a great job. They are following all of the internal controls that we evaluated in the initial audit. They follow best practices and, there's no way to 100% ensure that these type of transactions don't happen again, but the district has certainly implemented industry standard internal controls to prevent it to the extent possible. So I will read the conclusion on this audit report really quick. Based on the results of the test performed, overall, we found the district's internal controls for setting up vendors in the ACH payment program and updating vendor information, our vendor ACH bank information follow best practices and design and appear to be working efficiently and effectively to mitigate potential fraud associated with the ACH payment program and safeguard district funds. So this is the shortest audit report I've ever written because, the first report was the big one. So the report is only 4 pages long. So that's awesome. But congratulations to the finance department. Of course, they do a great job and I'm very happy that we don't have any recommendations or findings to share with them. So awesome.
Great. And a lot of the procedures had been modified prior to when this audit was undertaken. So between the time when we had the fraudulent attempt and when this audit began, there were a lot of modifications to our processes.
So they revamped their internal control system and trainings, and we reviewed all of that just to make sure it follows best practices and industry standards.
So does anyone have any questions? This audit is a great example of probably what is more on the rare end of the spectrum, which is an audit topic that is very discreet and sort of easy to corral.
Yeah, it's very specific. We had one thing and we had, a very short list of transactions that existed, and so we just tested them. It was very easy and straightforward. Not all of our audits are that way.
Yeah.
Janice, I had a question. So I'm curious, the number of transactions you tested them all or did a sampling?
Thank you for that question. I should have looked at it before, but we did test them all. However, so let me tell you, in my report, I said the district restarted their enrolling new vendors in November of 2020. So we pulled all transactions so when I say transactions, what I mean is all applications for vendor setup from November 2020 through June of 2021. And we tested all of them. There weren't very many, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
I'm sorry, did you say there weren't very many or there were very many?
Right. That's right. But I can't remember how many. But Mary Catherine would know off the top of her head, but she's not here, unfortunately. But we tested them all.
Anyone else have any other questions?
Awesome. All right. Now for the exciting part, group participation part here. We're going to talk about the scoping of the hardship petition transfer audit. So for each of you guys, I emailed you the policy and the related administrative directive, along with this document that I pulled up here. And that way you could think about it in advance. So hopefully you've had a chance to go over, just preview the policy and the administrative directive. So first, I want to start with some discussion about terminology, because when I was reading the policy and the administrative directive, I didn't find the term hardship. So it is a common term that the district has used, and it is on our website, but it's just not in policy. So I just wanted to be very specific for the purposes of this audit. When we say a hardship petition transfer, it is a petition to transfer to a different school based on extraordinary circumstances.
Which is also not in the policy, but in the AD.
That's in the AD. So, any questions about the terminology or what exactly we're talking about when we say the term hardship? So, in what I did is I pulled out a couple of pieces of the policy that I thought were directly applicable, and I wanted to go over those with you specifically. So if you will look at the policy. So in the policy, I highlighted a couple sections. So here, this one right here, petition transfers, is a request to transfer to a different neighborhood school or a focus option school after the lottery process has closed. So that's a petition transfer. Then, to more clarify, this section talks about a transfer to a different high school. Request to transfer to a different neighborhood school will be considered through the petition process. Petitions will be considered on an individual basis on a standard set of criteria, taking into consideration available space at the requested school. And then I highlighted this area right here because this is something that I've heard. So for policy, it says students enrolled in a transfer school do not have to reapply until completion of all grades at that school. So if they're transferred into elementary or middle school, they go back to their neighborhood school unless they apply for, so that, it's some policy that's there. So we'll see if that is being followed. Then,
Just kind of a hot topic.
yes.
No, it is not. Yeah, I mean, we have made blanket exceptions to that.
Yes. So I will have to look for resolutions that were passed in unique circumstances as I'm looking through everything to see if there's any special circumstances related to any one specific petition. Right, so in the policy, it says the superintendent shall establish protocols and procedures, including deadlines and appeals process for lottery and petition transfers and for interdistrict transfers. And it also says the superintendent shall establish a process for determining if space is available. And then this number 5, it says for transfers to a different neighborhood school or for transfers to a focus option after the lottery is closed, the petition transfer process will provide review of applications on an individual basis. The superintendent shall establish clear, flexible, and culturally relevant protocols and standards to the petition transfer process. In addition, the superintendent shall establish a process to collect and monitor data from petition transfers requests to ensure equitable process and decision-making and to identify areas of improvement in neighborhood schools. So if you look at the petition transfer scoping document, you can see here, I put in blue font a couple of key things that I wanted you to know that I'll be testing for specifically. So for the policy, we will look, we're going to go over the internal controls that were established to ensure that protocols and procedures are compliant with the board policy. And then very specifically, we're going to look at the established protocols and procedures to ensure they're clear, flexible, and culturally relevant. That is the criteria in the policy, very specifically. And then also to the established protocols and procedures, do established protocols and procedures Man, I miss Mary Catherine. She reviews my stuff. Okay, so establish a process to collect and monitor data from petition transfer requests to ensure equitable process and decision making to identify areas of improvement in the neighborhood schools. So those are the key elements of the policy that, I'm planning to test, but this is an opportunity for you to look at the policy and say, there's, maybe there's a paragraph that you want specifically tested or you're concerned about, but if I didn't cover it, this is your opportunity to let me know, and I can add it to my list to take into consideration. Specifically in the administrative directive, I highlighted a couple of things here. So in the administrative directive, here, which you guys should all have also highlighted. I highlighted these in the sections. So these are the 2 key paragraphs that I found in the administrative directive that I thought we want to point out. For petition transfers is a request by a family to transfer to a neighborhood school. Petitions are also used to request transfer to focus option grade levels not available during the lottery cycle and all focus option grade levels after the lottery cycle has closed. Petition transfers are considered for students and families only if there are extraordinary circumstances. So, that last sentence is very relevant. the next paragraph there, extraordinary circumstances is the basis for granting or denying petition transfers. They include urgent family situations or situations that pose imminent threat or health, safety, and serious educational concerns for a student. And then it talks about a list of typical reasons for petition transfer requests is available on our website. So I did pull up the website and I printed just the page for those of you that are here. It is so it says common transfer reasons include childcare, physical risk to a child at school, and sibling considerations. Staff will consider any reason for transfer. That's what's listed. So, you know, it's open. And I think that's probably why there's questions about it.
I have a question.
Go
Is when it says health, does that include mental health? Or is that just physical health? Or is that a case by case basis?
I mean, it's a case by case basis. And what I'll have to take into consideration, each application that is submitted is going to be individual to that student and the rationale for what their extenuating circumstances are. So there's really no way to say for sure until I go in and look at them, and we're gonna test a lot to look to see. And if it does mental, you know, I'll try to categorize high level what I see in the testing, but we'll try to differentiate between health and mental health.
It is a really good question, because we
Yep.
see a lot of requests based on bullying and issues, things like that. We've seen those.
I had a friend who transferred to Cleveland and it was not physical health related. So I think that
Yes.
it's common.
Janice, I had a question about the, I guess the overall like scoping of how many transfers are there currently? Like what's the universe? And then are these all like electronic records that you'd be going through, or is this a paper intensive process? I'm just wondering how automated and digitized it is in terms of ease of doing the audit.
So the district has a system, Schoolment, where each application is documented. Regardless of outcome, that's the application, it's in there. Prior to the pandemic, some supporting documentation was printed and kept in physical files here at the district office. So in those situations where we're testing applications prior to March 2020, we will have a paper a printed file that we will look at. Subsequent to the pandemic, there's less paper and the documentation is going to be maybe not all in the same place. So it will take a little bit longer to gather them, but there's still documents that we can gather. It's just not all going to be in the same spot like a paper file.
Judy, do you know off the top of your head the answer to Julia's question about numbers of hardship transfer requests?
I have that, I can answer that.
Actually, I know that she said she checked those with me earlier today.
I did.
she's got those.
So like for
um,
last year requests and
Okay,
how many were
So-
agreed to?
so far in the 2021 school year, even though we're not all the way done, bear with me a second.
It was 21, 22.
I mean, 21, 22, yes.
Dennis, I think we're right around 2,000 for the current school year.
Yeah,
We
okay,
had a low
exactly,
count last
2,100.
year. As you recall, we were in a pandemic and we didn't have physical schools and we had far fewer physical applications. So, but I know that Janice has also got the number for last year, and then our average for the two prior years for around 2,500 to 2,600 per
It's
year.
a lot.
So
Yeah.
1819 is 2,500 and 1920 is right at 2,500. I mean, give or take 2 or 3. 2021 was 1,740, so 1,740. And then year to date so far is around 2,100. So around 2,500, you seems to be a lot of extraordinary circumstances.
And
Do you have the numbers for how many of those are high schoolers versus K through 5 versus middle school?
I have all the data, but that is something I would have to really, so
Yeah.
send me an email
Okay.
and I can tell you that, but
Cool.
not off the top.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably as a matter of course, in the introductory part of the audit would be a background on, you know, this is what we found about the state of play. These are the numbers.
So speaking of data, that is kind of the next category in my, am I still presenting or no? No? I dropped the slide. Okay, so on the copy of, hopefully you have it in your email, the next section is related to data. So we're going to get the data and we're going to disaggregate the data by attendance area, school, race, grade. So, you know, high school, middle school, that will be included. And we're going to do 4 years of data, which, so current year back through 2018-19 school year. So in that data, we'll be looking at the data to ensure that the collection and monitoring of the data from petition transfer requests to ensure equitable process and decision making, and to identify areas of improvement in neighborhood schools. And we're going to answer some questions like, is there an indication that students are requesting a transfer out of any specific school at a higher rate than in other schools? And so this is your opportunity to ask me to answer additional questions related, you know, data related questions. If you would like anything specific, targeted, you can tell me, I will add them to my list.
I think maybe we should go back to just the first part of the scoping memo to see if people have suggestions by
Oh, for
section
policy
and
The AD, okay.
then end up with the data requests. I mean, one thing that's interesting to me about the pieces that you pulled out from the policy and the AD, which I agree are the most salient elements of it, are one, what are the established protocols and procedures? You know, are they clear? Are they culturally relevant? Are they flexible? I would say, are they equitable in the sense that are they being applied with a similar lens in a case by case basis? Because one thing that makes this process interesting to me is that yes, it's important to have a clear set of criteria, but yes, we're also acknowledging that there's some degree of subjectivity involved here on the part of the area supervisor or whomever is making that determination about what this student really needs. So kind of a fine line, and I'm looking at you, Judy, to correct me if I'm saying anything that doesn't jive with what your experience has been.
Well, she's just here for listening, so come to me. You know, that's, you know, I definitely want her to be here, but the audit will answer the question.
Yes.
So first, this is the first time that I'm doing this where you'll have input on the scope of an audit early in the audit, so we can add to it if needed. So let me know what you're thinking. I'll write it down and add it in and then present a final scope, you know, go over it with Judy. But what I heard you say is you are specifically want to consider whether the decision-making process is equitable and there's consistency in the application of the criteria.
Yes, consistency in the application of the criteria. And then my other comment, and then Julia, Andrew asked you for yours about, on the second bullet, did it establish protocols and procedures, establish a process to collect and monitor data? I want to look at, not only does it establish a process to do that, but historically, has that been done? Because, for example, I haven't seen that information come forward, like any kind of aggregated data about, like, here's what we learned about hardship transfer requests last year. Schools they're coming out of, schools they're seeking to go to. So it's part of our policy. Not only is it described in a helpful and productive way, but is it actually being done?
Right. So I know already that there is a lot of data being collected, just because I've seen the data and I have access to it at this point in the audit. But that is what we will go through as part of the audit. We'll consider whether or not there's enough data, or how is it being collected and what elements are collected.
And I guess I would add to that, not just that it's being collected, but that there's a loop with the Office of School Performance about what the data might be telling us.
I agree. I think that's a wonderful idea to use the live data for students exiting schools
Yeah.
for continuing performance.
Yeah, that in the policy, that second part where it says, this is where I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure it out as part of the audit, but to ensure equitable process and decision-making to identify areas of improvement. So that's, I think, a key aspect that I'll drill down on and see how the data is used.
Yeah.
for improvements.
Yeah. And this is a parallel conversation to one we had around changes to our complaint policy. Like, how are we using what we're hearing in that process and what people's experience is with that process to inform and improve the system?
Any other thoughts related to policy and administrative directives, specifically anything that you want to draw attention to make sure we consider or test?
Yeah, just really quick. And the scope looks good to me. So thanks, Janice. I did have a question. Let me pull it back up. Just the and I didn't see this in the AD, but I didn't look that closely for it. Sort of the thing we're testing are the established protocols and procedures clear, flexible, and culturally relevant. Does the AD define culturally relevant? And the reason why I ask is because from an audit perspective, it's going to be an interesting and challenging thing to audit unless it's defined really clearly.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
I was about to ask a similar question: is how does the policy, or I guess how does the AD define it, and how do you define it? I guess to measure that, like, how do you measure cultural relevance? I mean, in this situation.
This is part of the challenge of doing the audit. I've reviewed the administrative directive. I also didn't see the term, like a clear, but you just have to let me get through the audit. I hear the concern, and as I go through the audit, I will keep that in mind, and in the report, make sure to clarify the definition around whatever we use is. We'll clarify and say specifically what we're identifying culturally relevant as.
I guess that leads me to a similar question about defining. You've mentioned previously that hardship, right, was the one that also didn't have a clear
Wasn't
definition.
included, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, and this, I mean, it's not your job, so like to define what is a hardship, but I was wondering if you move towards having some sort of definition, either from policy or the board, or in your board.
So I grappled with whether or not we should still call it hardship. It's a common term, and the district staff all typically use the term. It's on our website. The term hardship is on our website, but that's not in our AD or in our policy. But that's why I wanted to set the terms up front. When we say a hardship petition transfer, I'm talking very specifically about a petition to transfer to a different school based on extraordinary circumstances. And
relative to an existing set of criteria.
Right.
I mean, I think it's, the reason it's been reinforced by the district is to establish that, you know, we are a district of neighborhood schools. And we do have a ordinary transfer process for focus option schools. And this is for what should be considered extenuating circumstances.
Exactly. And
But
in the
2,000 is a
administrative-
lot, you know?
Yeah, in the
That is a lot.
administrative directive,
5%,
it's very
yeah.
clear, and it says only extraordinary circumstances. So I did bold that word only, just to clarify, in the administrative, it says petition transfers are considered for students and family only if there are extraordinary circumstances. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about petitions to transfer for an extraordinary circumstance.
So one of the questions I would have is, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but the range of subjectivity that is sort of extraordinary circumstances. Does it seem consistent? Like there's a consistent definition, or how it's applied is consistent? Because it seems like with the more sort of broad, or the terminology being fairly broad, is, you know, there could be a lot of range of, there could be a broad range of subjectivity, or maybe there's not, and that would be good to know. I mean, I think, you know, just having been around PPS a long time, that there's this sense that, like, there's one set of rules, but like it gets applied differently. Maybe it makes perfect sense that it's applied differently because we're using a set of criteria, or it may be there's a lot of subjectivity and it is applied differently, not necessarily on an objective basis. So that would be sort of one question. I'm not quite sure how to frame that up, but I'll just throw that piece out. And then I guess on the scope, I do think this is building a little bit off of what Chair Constam and so the others' comments, is like looking at who's accessing the this. Like, do people know? Like, do people even know that there's a system? Like, who, if you're, you know, do we have people whose first language is in English accessing it? You know, what does the data show us that, like, who's accessing it the most? Who is most successfully accessing it? Like, they know how to write a successful, you know, transfer application. Just like looking at that sort of data on a disaggregated data. And it would be, I think, very illustrative to also look at, you know, is it just happening around, you know, just pretty much uniformly across the district, or do we have hotspots of people where people are more families are petitioning out, or more families are petitioning in? So those would be the things that I would be interested in. There's also, you know, a lot of conversation about, like, you know, whether there's you know, people are transferring because of sports or like some other special program, and, you know, are there things that are driving it that are different from extraordinary circumstances? But when you look at the data, it becomes clear through the applications.
Got it. I think so. The range of rationale, what I heard you say, just to make sure I'm taking notes properly, there's going to be a range of rationale for what is identified as extenuating circumstances. The policy and the administrative directive, I think, are intentionally big, because it provides the opportunity for the district to solve problems that come up regardless of what they might be. You want to keep it open, and then, but that does give the opportunity for some subjectivity. Yeah. So in order to look, so we will have to do a lot of testing to see if the consistency of the application, right, of the criteria, that's how we'll know whether or not what we have is effective and working, if all of them are consistent and evidence shows that it's applied consistently across the board, great. If not, then that's what we'll identify. We'll talk about. But I also got who's accessing the system, Director Ben Edwards, and who is successfully using the system. Those two are data points that I'm pretty sure I can pull, so I added those to my list.
And part of what I would be looking for in that first, assessment of established protocols and procedures are clear, flexible, and culturally relevant. So as to whether they're clear, like, is there a common rubric? And will you be able to, like, look at a rubric at each case? And it doesn't mean that takes all the subjectivity out, because if someone says, it's an issue of climate that is untenable for my student, then there's going to be a lot of details there that are hard to capture. But still, just, is there a rubric that every area director is using for sort of the top of that template? And then the other thing I was wondering is there a shortcut? Like, when we have, sometimes we have these agreements between schools that a certain school is under enrolled and a neighboring school is over enrolled, and this may be urban myth, but it's always been my understanding that in those situations there's an easier way. There's to transfer between those two usually adjacent schools without having to go through the hardship transfer process, or maybe you do have to go through the hardship transfer process, but it's just encouraged. Judy's okay. So anyway, I would be curious about that. Like, when we know that we have schools that have capacity and could be a relief valve for adjacent schools that are over capacity, what does that mechanism look like?
So I want to be careful, because when I pull hardship petition transfer data, it will only be for those who filed a petition.
Right. But you just nodded your head. So even in those circumstances where, like, once Judy's trying to be invisible and I'm not letting her, but I can't ignore the expert in the room.
It's important that you explain it to me so I can get the answers you're looking for.
So, for example, you'll have times, like in my student school, one time, there was capacity, and a neighboring school was over enrolled. And so there was put the word out to families over there that if they want to apply to Ainsworth, there's space, and here's the process for it.
Wasn't that done with Chapman and Ainsworth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just didn't know.
Element.
But not the only time. But
when I was in Ainsworth, I remember that.
Yeah.
Or my parents at least.
Yeah.
And we did get kids that transferred from Hardship.
But so
I'll look into that.
I'm curious, is you still have to go through the hardship transfer process, and your stated reason is just overcrowding or something? Anyway, poor Judy, she's trying. Anyway,
I'll look into it.
yes.
Awesome question. Thank you. Anything else for policy and administrative directive?
I do think it would be good in some way to call out I don't know, I guess this is hopefully taken care of on the rubric, but to your point, Xander, just issues of climate and mental health.
Yeah.
And making sure that we are, that our process includes criteria that are sort of progressive and compassionate.
Yeah.
In that way.
All right, so I think I've got a lot of ideas to add to my list. Thank you very much. Then for the data, the first thing we're going to do is make sure there's a process and we're collecting the data. And then we're going to disaggregate the data and, highlight a few key points that I'll try to do my best to do some graphs over time and try to really identify what you're asking for, who's accessing the program, who's successful, who may not be, any specific schools where you're seeing any trends, any grades where there's trends, where a bunch of people might be transferring, wanting, having a hardship during the fourth grade. I'm not sure what we'll find when we do that data analysis, but that is the type of data analysis that we will do and provide that information to you. All right.
Andrew or Julia, any comments on that data section?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So for the hardship petition transfer request, we are going to get a list of all of the transfers requests, regardless of outcome, over the last 4 years. From the complete list, we will select individual requests for testing. We will use a sampling methodology to test individual requests. In addition to sampling, are there any specific areas that you guys would like tested? So for example, if perhaps you have heard that, I'm picking on fourth grade, sorry, I don't know why, but a bunch of kids have trouble in the fourth grade and are trying to transfer out of this one specific school. Well, I can filter the data by fourth grade and see if there's any validity to that concern and address that. So this is your opportunity. I have to do the sampling to get adequate coverage. There's going to be a lot of testing. But if there's any specific category that you're concerned about, any grade level, I can do specific grade level testing in addition to my sampling. Or maybe you're concerned about when I can do middle school, or whatever your concern is, if there's a data element for it, I can filter for that and test them very specifically to address concerns and potentially debunk some concerns that may be out there. So if you've heard it, tell it to me and I will, get it in there somehow. And maybe right this minute is not the best format for you to tell me everything that you may have heard. But I would like to know what you've heard so I can address that specifically.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that the policy, allows for the transfer to remain in place through the highest grade of that particular school. So if we can test to see, are we allowing students to, continue with their cohorts to the next level without a hardship transfer process? Or are we consistently abiding by that aspect of the policy?
Yep, so that one I have on my list to test for sure. So in order to do that, I'll be looking at the top grade in that school and look to trace those students that were in fifth grade. Where did they go in sixth grade? Did they go with the cohort in their transfer school, or did they go back to their neighborhood school? Or perhaps there was an additional petition transfer, hardship petition transfer request filed, and so they are allowed to go to the new stay with their cohort and go to the new middle school.
I have a question. I'd be interested to know specifically the amount of students that reapplied to continue with their cohort and were accepted. If there's any sort of preference given for students to stay with their cohort, which may have already been answered by some other discourse.
Yeah, that's been a difficult one as we
I-
built DLI programs and students that maybe have gone across town or something to be part of a DLI cohort, then go back to their neighborhood school.
I remember that a bit from the Southeast Guiding Coalition
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah,
I wrote that one down, so that's a good one.
yeah. I mean, generally the fifth grade I don't know that I'm necessarily, I'm just gonna plant this seed in your brain, but I'm not necessarily directing that we go down this rabbit hole, but the 5th grade is really interesting because just to see the movement now that we have a mix of K-8s and middle schools, do we have very many students in K-8s that are petitioning to go to comprehensive middle schools? Do we have very many students who are slated to go to a comprehensive middle school that want to go to a middle grades? I was at a K-8 earlier this week, and I asked the question if they had many 5th graders who sought to transfer out so they could have a comprehensive middle school experience. They said, no, actually the reverse is true. They have about 50 kids, this was at Vernon, about 50 kids every year that transfer into their 6th grade because they want that smaller setting. So that was,
Interesting.
I don't know how relevant it is, but it's interesting.
So I can drill down in the data for and isolate K-8s and see
Yeah.
if there's any trends in K-8 specifically that 6th grade in a K-8 school. Is there a trend?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Who's coming in and
Data
who's
point.
going
I'll
out?
take a look at that. Okay, then the last section here. I listed a few testing elements, so you would kind of have an idea very specifically what some of the tests will do. So we're going to test the petitions to determine if the approval or denial of the hardship petition transfer are consistent. We're going to test to determine whether the students return to their neighborhood schools following the completion of the highest grade at the approved transfer school, or if there was another hardship petition transfer filed. We're going to test hardship petition transfers that were appealed to determine whether the appeal process was followed as described in the administrative directive. We'll also test to determine if before a hardship petition transfer is filed, the family and school staff has discussed ways to resolve any concerns and help the student and family recommit to the enrolled school. And then the reassignment element in the administrative directive, I wanted to pull that out to go over with you. So the petition transfer form includes a section which asks for information to enable ETC, enrollment and transfer C. I'm not sure what the C is. Okay, to consider schools for reassignment based on the family's transportation need, desired school characteristics, and if the student wishes to return to his or her neighborhood school. Families may list up to 3 schools and why they consider them appropriate. However, there's no guarantee that the student will be reassigned to any of the listed schools. So I'm going to look to see, at the reassignment this process, it seems there's some discretion about where you're getting reassigned to. You get to ask for one of 3 schools, but that doesn't necessarily mean you will be reassigned there. So I'm going to drill down into that specific area as well. Any other elements that you guys are really excited for me to test? No? Okay, well, if you think of any, call me.
This scope does not include anything about interdistrict.
Inter-district, no. So the policy is the petition process is for Portland Public School District residents only.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just clarifying that
Yeah.
because it doesn't say anything about our interdistrict transfer process.
So
That
the
is a
policy
different policy.
is a lot of different elements inside the policy, but I just picked out the pieces that were relevant to the petition transfer process.
Can you guys think of anything else based on your experience, just knowing kids who have or haven't?
I think it'd be interesting looking at it like school by school
Yeah,
and like data from like east side schools versus west side schools and really breaking down but like where students are coming from and where they're going to at all stages, but I think high school would be interesting to see what's the most popular transfer out and transfer in.
the other thing is to look at it from an enrollment balancing perspective, like are our criteria for a hardship transfer the same even when there's a clear benefit to the district from
Yeah.
that movement, you know, like what we were talking about in schools that have capacity and students coming from schools that are over capacity.
Yeah, I think that'd be
You know, that's interesting. Or how about outreach, you know, when we have dual language immersion programs that are nowhere near their cap, like all the people that testified this week, coming from Beach in classes with like 18 students in their DLI program when they're have a capacity for 26. Like, is there any role for the district to be proactive in communicating out to families that there could be an opportunity rather than just the onus being on the family to look for that opportunity?
I'm gonna need to follow up with you on separately to drill down a little bit on that, because that might be a little out of the scope of what I was thinking, but I want to make sure and follow up with you to make sure I understand. So I'll touch base with you on that one.
I'm interested to see sort of what happens. I think everyone that I know that's applied for a hardship transfer, which admittedly is very few, but they've always been accepted. I'd be sort of interested in what percentage just get rejected just completely, and then if there's a process to appeal that decision, which might be somewhat out of the scope, but
There is an appeals process and we will make sure it was followed,
okay.
but what percentages of rejections, I will look at that, that's a good
And then if there's
to identify.
and then what sort of reasons would a student just be told no? Is something that I'm interested in.
Okay, just one thought that came to my head. We also have to remember that student information is private. So when we're thinking about reasons or rationale, everybody's gonna be different, but I will try to, group some together and give some perspective on as to what those rational reasons are without invading people's privacy.
Like, we'll want to see some of the actual explanations, but obviously without identifying information about what school they were associated with.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody? Christian, any thoughts?
Yeah, one thing that I'm wondering about is what, if any, are the common elements of schools that students are requesting to transfer to? So for instance, is there a certain sport that students are trying to get to, or otherwise are they switching from low income schools to high income schools?
Great question. I will see what I can find in the data there. Anybody else?
All right, thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, I was just going to ask, and I don't know if I can't tell if this was covered by somebody else's question, but when something gets denied, is there consistency in how it's explained to the family and the student? And are they consistently given the same information about how to appeal? It's more of a process, and just whether it's family friendly and consistently applied.
Got it? Thank you. Okay, well,
Thank you.
I've got so much work to do. Thank you so much for sharing your input. I really appreciate it. You know, this is a great process to do this up front because the worst thing is delivering a report and you're like, what? You didn't cover X. So now I feel like I at least have the opportunity to cover all these things in the report. So this was a great exercise.
She's trying to say, speak now and forever hold your peace.
That is what I'm trying to say, but I wouldn't have said it.
But if you guys haven't had a chance to look through the policy, I would encourage you to do so in the administrative directive. And if anything occurs to you that we haven't talked about here today, just reach out to Janice and me for sure.
And also, I emailed all the board members, even the non-committee members, the policy and the scope document, and said, if you want to give me feedback. So everybody's been provided the opportunity, and I will collect them all. But there will be a deadline, maybe in like a week. I've got to get the focus dialed in and deliver it to the studio over there, so she'll know what we're testing. Okay. The last thing on our agenda, thank you, Judy, for today is to talk about the budget for our office, the Office of Internal Performance Audit. And since for some reason I can't share, because I got kicked off the Zoom, but you should all have a copy of the OIPA budget request. So this year, I really just want to articulate that by this discussion here in the audit committee, you're not formally approving our budget in any way. There's a different process for that. But one thing that I think it's important that we do is for discretionary elements of our budget, so everything non-salary related, if you know, these are the things I want input from you guys. So in this list, one new element that I want to take into consideration this year is translation services. I was at a board meeting when Marifer gave this very invigorating translation speech, and it was just so, I was like, oh, we gotta get everything translated. And then I got a quote on how much those translation services would cost. So then I realized, well, I'm gonna have to talk to you guys about what the audit committee would like. So I got a quote for the P card audit, just as one, just to get an idea. And the estimate is $4,000
For the entire audit.
For the P card audit.
And that's from an external vendor?
Yes, and it's based off of the number of words.
Yeah.
And my reports are long, unfortunately, but you know, one audit that I think I would like to ask you guys to, at a minimum, approve would be the translation of the ESL audit. When it comes time, I think it would be really relevant to get that one translated. And maybe any other ones at your request, or I'm just not sure what your thoughts are.
But this
in
is
relationship
this
to
for all of them, or just for is this proposed number here just for the ESL?
So I estimated 10,000 for the ESL. I anticipate it will be very long.
So more than twice as long as the P card audit.
Absolutely.
And then did you talk to our internal translation, our language access people about what they could do for us?
So I think I followed the correct process. I went to Marifer and she kind of directed me to how to get a translation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very expensive. I care very much. I was blown away by what she talked about, and I just got really motivated to want to translate everything. But it's there. I can see on the list of priorities for translation, perhaps an audit report might fall a little lower than other things. So I want to be cognizant of that and at least ask for the ESL audit and maybe think about the other audits moving forward. It's up to you. What are your thoughts?
I do think that there would be a lot of value in doing the ESL audit, and then for the other audits, I would think that the executive summary, would be,
I'm curious too, just I was thinking about current audits that are on there. If we even have, we could look at how many people even look at them in general.
yeah, or if we've ever had a request for,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it might be if nobody looks
Right.
for them, is it worth doing it, or is it, we indicate that people can request it?
or we could just do the executive summary of the ESL audit, and then, you know, the other is to offer people who are interested, it'd be a lot less expensive to have a conversation with a translator about the document than the entire document itself.
I would say, I mean, it's a huge access thing and a huge equity thing. If there's a market for it, if someone wants to read an audit and they can't,
Right,
that's obviously a large barrier.
right,
One,
especially if it's about them
especially if it's
and
about
their
them.
kids.
And I mean, I understand it is pretty expensive, pretty pricey. I agree with you. Maybe the executive summary of audits. And another idea that I had was per request.
Yeah,
Again, because if there isn't a need, why spend the money? But if there is a need and if there is a desire to translate it, I think that that's our duty.
yeah,
So I would say if there's some way to make an accessible request process to have an audit report translated, that would be what I would feel was best personally.
I can look into it.
yeah,
A form online or not survey, but or a form. Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
Um,
How does that work with public records, Roseanne? Like if someone, do we ever have anyone make a request through the public records process for certain documents in their native language, documents that haven't already been translated?
I don't know.
It's kind of
I
interesting.
know that at time report office that requested certain policies to be translated,
Uh-huh,
and then we need to make that accommodation.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
We take it to like a school or a
Yeah.
agent that's gonna need something.
Yeah.
Accommodation with public records.
Yeah.
Documents that-
Yeah, I mean, I think of, spending $10,000 on something that quite likely perhaps no one will
it's a fairly
request, and then,
I think you guys are underestimating how popular
I
these
know.
audit reports are.
You-
I
you
mean,
are
come on
massive.
now.
You're
but I
right,
think
you are
how long
right.
it took
Very
us to even
exciting.
get interpreters in our 504 meetings. I mean, that was heartbreaking,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just
So-
want to be, I mean, I got really inspired because when I heard Mary for talk, I was like, I need to do my part and translate my things, but it's a resource issue. So what I think I'm hearing is you would like potentially to consider translation at per request. Maybe I could get something on our website. If you want any of these translated, let us know. I'll look into that.
And
Get back to
obviously
you.
making the request language accessible.
Okay.
I think we
I'll
should
look at
plan on, though, the translation of the executive summary at a minimum of the ESL.
And
Audit.
maybe, I mean, can you provide me with like a general idea of how long an executive summary is?
that. Say the executive summary is usually 3 or 4.
Okay. I would suggest, I mean, depending again on viewership, translating a percentage of the executive summaries, I guess for some of the more recent, or more pertinent, executive summaries.
Okay.
Just an idea.
We could just do it on a case by case basis. So each audit we could decide, like, this seems relevant and may be of more interest in, like, for
But that doesn't,
specifically the ESL audit. But
That
that
doesn't
makes-
really work if we haven't budgeted for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the part that makes it hard. So, if the concept of budgeting for translation services is what you guys would like me to look into a little bit more detail, I can come back. I just wanted to give you some sort of estimate, and hear your feedback. And I will come back to you, I guess.
Okay,
with-
we can talk about that in
Little
the
bit.
interim, and I can communicate with the rest of the committee since our, we'll have to move budget requests forward before our next meeting likely.
So you can see in the other list of items here, our office is very lean. There's just two of us. So primarily the cost outside of salary is for training, professional development. So Mary Catherine and I are both required to have 40 hours of professional development that meet auditing standards. So it can't just be any professional development, it has to be certified. So that's really it's been hard to get during the pandemic. I've been really lucky because I passed the CIA test. And so I got professional development credit for 2 years. So you can see that we haven't used all the budget in the past. But now my 2 years is done. And so we're gonna have to make a much more effort to get that training in moving forward.
All right,
Any questions, any feedback, any thoughts?
the sun has gone down. Any public comment? No? No one here? Okay. We'll be back in touch. Good luck getting our new audit underway. Christian, really nice to meet. Do you go by Christian?
I do, yeah.
Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for your willingness to serve. We look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
So there is a resolution that was approved back when Kate was added to the committee. And so there's a resolution that needs to be approved by the board. So
Okay.
I pulled the one that was done for Kate. I could change the name on it and send that to you, and then you
Okay.
can handle with Roseanne about
Okay.
getting a formal appointment.
Sounds good?
Okay. Does he need to show up for the,
Not necessarily.
okay,
No.
just making sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.